Hey, welcome to the Health Coaches Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Howard Jacobson.
And I am another of your co-hosts, Kevin Davis.
Yes, correct. So,
Sweet. I got one question right.
okay, well, since you got one right, I'm going to give you another. So,
Sure.
I want to talk to you today about something that you do a lot of, and I'm not doing much of these days, which is text-based coaching. So
Yes.
not live, not audio, not in person, but via different platforms. And there's two different kinds. There's one to many, so a group with a forum where you're coaching an individual in their group, so everyone can see your response and their responses to your response ad infinitum. And also one-on-one private SMS text coaching, which could then you know, be the same as doing it on, WhatsApp or a private, any sort of private platform where it's just you to them.
Email or whatever
So,
you prefer.
so I guess the first question is, how is it different from synchronous coaching, where you and the person are in an active dialogue in real time?
So, I was kind of thinking about this, and I think that probably, to me anyway, the most obvious difference is speed. This is something that really stands out to me because when you're in a phone conversation, you're on a Zoom chat or some of these other methodologies that we use, you're immediately getting feedback and giving feedback to their questions. Versus, I do a lot of text messaging or discussion boards and things like that you mentioned. And I may send someone a text message and it might be noon and they see it at 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So the speed is definitely something that's a big change. And so it's kind of interesting because to me, that change in speed means two things. Like, one, I need to be prepared to wait, and to understand that a conversation might take a couple of days versus a couple of minutes. But then I also don't want to make them wait terribly long either, because I want to be able to keep their mind, focused on what we're trying to accomplish and keep it top of mind.
So that reminds me of in the old days when you wanted to play chess with someone and you weren't in the same room, you'd play chess by mail,
Yeah.
right? So you
Yeah.
would mail them your move, and then like a week later, you'd get a move back from them. Um, and so if someone's asking a question, and in the normal coaching relationship, you would want to ask a whole bunch of curiosity-based questions to establish like what's the scenario, what's the situation, all the things that we are curious about. And you do that in the same way that you do it with live coaching. It'll be a month and a half, and you still haven't helped them.
That's correct. And so that's one of the things that I do differently. And to be fair, though, Howard, there are times where I still ask those questions. I may not ask all of them, but you kind of get a feel on a client by client basis, especially in, the private, the one-on-one text messages and things like that type of a setting. If you know that someone is a person who typically responds pretty quickly, or even if you just notice that, hey, today this person has responded to me 3 times in a row,
Hmm.
those are the cases where I may be more likely to go ahead and ask some of those questions. Because I have done a full, you know, curious questioning. I mean, just like a full quick process,
Mm-hmm.
QICC, one of the, one of the processes that we use as a coaching method, just text
Uh-huh.
messaging someone. However, commonly I notice that I skip ahead past a lot of that curious questioning and get into the idea phase where we're starting to come up with, okay, what are some action steps that might work for this, and doing a little brainstorming and some of those things a lot quicker with the person.
Hmm. Do you have a sense, and I guess this is impossible to answer with data, but your felt sense of the difference in energy or whatever in the coachee in a live situation, whether it's in person or audio or video, or versus texting? Like, are they more or less, vulnerable, agitated, curious, open, desperate?
I think it takes a little more to build the comfort level and the rapport to get to that point, where they bring in that energy, and especially the vulnerability. Um, but I have had cases where it gets there, and I think also it depends on the person. Some people are more comfortable with, just in general, with using that type of method. Um, a lot of the work that I'm doing is really with what we're doing with WellStart. So these people also have live coaching calls with you, or with Sarah, generally, some of our other coaches. And so they do have a little bit more experience with the coaching method, with the coaching process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other thing that I notice is it helps to be very straightforward about what they can expect and who they can expect to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
So in a situation like this, where there are a couple of us who handle these messages, it's very helpful with a lot of the people to make sure that they know, okay, this is Kevin, or this is Sarah, or this is Howard, or this is whoever, when
Mm-hmm.
you're texting with the person.
Right. So one thing that I have done when I'm coaching via email, and sometimes it usually happens, someone has to cancel and they still say, hey, I've got this issue, and I'll shoot them an email, is like when I'm coaching live, I'm a magician in that
Yeah.
I don't telegraph, I don't necessarily tell them what I'm doing in the moment. Like I'll do a line of questioning and like, trust me, go with me on this. It'll lead somewhere. Via email, I don't do that. I'll be much more explicit about, here's what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to help us see if there's a broader context. So I'm going to ask you a few questions that may seem a little bit unrelated, right? So that the person isn't sort of in their own world hanging, and I have no way of touching back into their thought or emotional processes, and then they could end up like stewing or just thinking I'm just, jerking their chain.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thought, actually, because that's definitely something that I think is going to be different, is that, if you just try to go off and work through a process that they have no idea what you're doing, like you said, asking all those questions, if it takes a month and a half to get somewhere, if you're doing that and they don't know what you're up to, they may not last the month and a half
Mm-hmm.
or the day and a half or whatever it is. They may just stop answering.
Right.
Um, so I definitely do find myself kind of explaining more of what I'm up to. For some reason, when you mentioned that concept, the thing that kept coming to mind to me was some of the never binge again work that we use a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
So that involves setting up some rules and some boundaries around specific things that come up for the person. This is a great one with the text chat to use that type of work, but I always try to explain, here's what it is, here's why we're setting up a rule, or here's why I'm asking you for these specifics, is so that we can have a very clear, distinction between whether or not you're doing what you've set out to do or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because Never Binge Again is so, in a way, not linear but flowcharty. Like you kind of
Yeah.
know like where you are in the process. That I think if you're doing text-based coaching with someone, it's a good test of whether you have a process, right? Because in the moment when you're coaching live, there's all sorts of other things that can happen. You can get distracted, you can get emotional, but it's like a game of chess again, where you get to pause, think out, be more strategic, and then say, okay, so where are we in the process? So where is this person on the WHAM pyramid? We haven't talked about the WHAM pyramid on this podcast yet.
No, we may have to do an episode talking about that.
Okay. Teaser.
Yeah,
next
teaser for
next
next week.
time, next week. Um, but whatever the process. Like I was talking to someone today about the OKRs, and I was just jotting down like big goal, key result, critical behavior, and I came up with a new acronym, the BOI step, which is BOI, the bet on it. Like, what are you so sure about that you'd bet on it?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like that is a process that when you're in the middle of, you can always refer back to, and okay, here we are. So here's my next move.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually to me, as a coach, and I think, this is where you and I have different strengths. Not that I'm not a capable, or hopefully at least somewhat decent coach
Mm-hmm.
live, but as far as just winging it with things, I'm very good at setting out, like, here's the steps, or here's the things, or the outline that I want to do. And so I love okay, this person texted me. Now I can go over here and I can think out, what do I want to do? What do I want to discuss with them? Do I want to look back at earlier conversation? Because of course, if you're texting or emailing with someone, you may have a chain of
Mm.
emails, or like the forum that I'm on, a lot of it is that text message, one-on-one kind of private conversation, and I can just scroll up.
Mm-hmm.
So
I guess at that point, you're also seeing their language rather than having to, like, it's very easy when, so in the coach training, people won't notice that someone just said the word need 3 times in one sentence.
yeah,
It's much easier for most of us to see it in writing, where it doesn't just disappear into the past.
right.
There's a record.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would say probably actually comes up at a higher rate than it does in live coaching, just simply because, like you said, you automatically see the word need, or the word should, or have to, or whatever. Some of these words where they feel very much like it's something they're supposed to do, not something they want to do. Yeah, that's definitely something that we bring up to our clients quite often that way.
So let me ask you this. So you said
Sure.
you'd often jump to the idea phase to help them identify options, rather than spend a lot of time in the Q and U, questioning and understanding phases. And we know when we do that in live coaching, there's a big cost. How do you minimize that cost when you're skipping to the I to identify options?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Howard. I am in a very fortunate situation where we do have also some live coaching with these people. So there are definitely times where I'm kind of, if it feels like a situation where there's going to be a big cost, I may refer them to, like, hey, let's have this conversation live on the coaching call tomorrow night at 8 p.m. or whatever.
Okay.
So in a way, I kind of pick and choose my battles with those. If it's something where I feel like they're going to, converse back and forth with me, I won't skip ahead like that. But a lot of times with those text coaching questions and things that I get from people are the stuff that's coming up throughout the week. So they may be coming up with, oh man, I'm really struggling with fitting in workouts. They're not saying my overall goal is that I want to lose 50 pounds, and part of my plan for doing that is to work out, 17 times a month, or whatever, whatever that is. They're saying I'm struggling to fit the workouts into my day. And so so then my approach is more, okay, great. One of the ways you can fit that in is you can stop every hour and do 3 push-ups, or, whatever that discussion leads to. So I think just the type of questions and concerns that come up in that segment of the coaching helps with a good percentage of the time with being a little more able to skip ahead like that.
And is there a way to, and it might be different on the forum, where you have more space, you can write a couple of paragraphs, to preload questions and then offer some suggestions? So, to give people some thinking homework, some analysis homework, and then say, here's some things like, okay, I'm not fitting in my workouts. Say, when would you like to fit in your workouts? Was there a time in the past where you were able to? If so, what's changed? Here's some things that people are doing these days, during pandemic. For example, getting up every hour and doing 3 push-ups, taking, lowering their standards and taking shorter walks.
Well, the thing that I love about doing things that way is that you get the thoughtfulness, you get the questions, you get some of the curiosity and the background, or not really background information, but the additional information that we want from them, along with, you don't want them to feel like you're pushing them off and sort of ignoring the broader question. And so if you can do something like that, where you give them, okay, here's an answer, of sorts right now, and then here's what I want to do to move forward and overall try to tackle this problem as we go.
Uh-huh.
Seems to
Okay.
help. Yeah.
So there's all sorts of studies that you see about communication being, 90% nonverbal,
Yeah.
which means when you strip away tone of voice, cadence, and video and facial expressions and gestures, that you're relying everything. And we all know about people, the emails that we write that are supposed to be ha funny, then people get upset about. What do you do to take care that you're not communicating in a way that's going to be misinterpreted?
I think I overwrite. I think I overexplain to
Mm.
some degree. I definitely feel like I spell things out more than I would if I were just speaking in a verbal, in a video, or a telephone call, um, type of excuse me, type of a situation with someone. Just for that exact reason. Like actually I'm very sarcastic or try to make jokes or things like that. It's just my natural way of speaking. And when I'm typing to someone, if I send Howard a text message, I might still do that. But to
Mm-hmm.
expect that, how to take me and that kind of thing. If I'm sending a client a text message, it's going to be much more explaining, okay, here's what I'm saying and why and what I mean by that.
Okay.
But the other thing, the alternative side of that, though, Howard, that I would also mention is there's going to be times then where you don't necessarily get that same information from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do also find myself, I sort of said earlier that I don't ask as many questions in that sort of curious questioning way a lot of times, but I also do find myself asking more questions to clarify what they mean by something they've said.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I would hate to just make an assumption based on how I read it and then give them this big answer and it's completely contradictory to what they meant.
Right. And one thing to do there is to be really explicit about your assumption. So, like, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you meant here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to assume by like the week from hell that you had some, that you've eaten okay, but you had a few meals each day or a few moments each day where you really felt you hadn't connected. So let me respond. If that's not right, let me know. But I'm going to respond based on that assumption. So
Yeah.
again, you're front loading something potentially useful, and even if it's not useful, at least they recognize that you're trying to help them.
Yeah, there's a lot of value to that. Just having them see that you're willing to discuss with them and try to work with them and help them. I mean, obviously you're coaching them and they've been working with you for weeks or months or whatever that time is, but just to see that, okay, today on Thursday, I'm asking this question and Kevin is willing to discuss with me. I don't know. I feel like there's value there in just showing that you care. And that sort of goes back to what I mentioned before about trying to make sure that I'm responding within a reasonable amount of time. While I understand that especially being a text message, that form of communication, just kind of societally is understood to be something where it's not a phone call. You don't have to pick it up and respond within seconds, or it's gone. It stays there. On my end, as the coach, basically what I've got set up as sort of a rule for how to do this is that within 3 to 4 hours, there should always be a response or acknowledgement of a text message. And then the caveat being to set boundaries around that. So, at the end of the business day, if I stop, the last time that I check is 6 p.m. Eastern, then anything that happens after that is not going to get a response until the next day.
Mm-hmm. And the time to articulate the boundaries is before you start the
Yes.
relationship, right? So it's not like Kevin's ghosting me.
Yes. Exactly. And to be fair, and this may or may not be the right way to do it, but personally, one of the things that I do is if I get into a conversation where, okay, this person has really been responsive today and I'm asking a lot more of those questions that we would do live, there are definitely times where I will respond outside of those, business hours of whatever,
Mm-hmm.
8 in the morning to 6 p.m. or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I
Um,
would say like 95% of my coaching clients are more concerned about my boundaries than I am.
Yeah.
Right. So it's they'll not want to bother me.
Right.
Like, even, like, oh, this call can go 5 minutes over or something, or, oh, I'm not going to, I'm too needy. I don't want to keep taking up your time. So to encourage them, like, it's okay. This is my job. This is why I'm here.
Yeah. And I think, as coaches, of course, we're people that want to help others. So our natural instinct is just to give of ourselves or our time or whatever. Then also a lot of us here are in some sense an entrepreneur. And so, working for yourself or, working on your own or online, especially that sort of thing, it's very easy to just be available 24/7. And so, like you said, while they may be more conscious of our boundaries at times, it is good to set boundaries for yourself.
Right. And one other thing I would say, I think it's still really important if we're doing the, identify options for them to a certain extent, is to make sure we're framing them as suggestions and experiments to conduct rather than instructions.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I do with those, I gave the example earlier about trying to fit in exercise. I always try to make sure that my suggestion is explicitly stated as, like you said, a suggestion. I'll say, you could do something like 3 push-ups. I always give a few different options. If I'm saying stop every hour, I'll say, you can stop every hour or whatever time fits for you, but stop periodically throughout the day and do 3 push-ups, a couple of squats, 1 sit-up, walk around the house, whatever works for you. And just make sure that they understand that my purpose here is to pick something, not to pick what I said.
Right. Because remember that the I is called identify options, generally plural, and options are optional.
Yes, optional.
So once you've sent out that, here's a bunch of things you could try message, do you request any sort of follow-up feedback? Like, let me know what you tried and what happened, or do you just sort of leave that to them?
There's a mix, but I would say that where in like a live coaching setting, that's going to be every time. Definitely there are times where that doesn't necessarily happen. And again, it depends on sort of the setting of the problem or question that we're tackling, given that some of these are more day-to-day or issues for that given week rather than like an overarching big goal for the program. Sometimes I may not necessarily do that. But I do like to, if you've got the time to actually be able to, send some messages back and forth a few times, I really do like to go ahead and ask those kind of finalizing questions. Hey, can you commit to this? Do you think this is something you can stick to? What are the odds you're going to do this week, and that type of thing?
Now, when I was doing text coaching, I don't like it as much as you do. I didn't feel like I was as good at it as you are. When I was doing it, one thing that I did that I liked is sometimes I would want to give a longer answer than I could, and I wanted to have more nuance in it. So I would record a video of myself. I would not say the person's name. So I would answer it specifically but generally, so that my answer wouldn't break confidentiality. If I just said, okay, so you're finding that because of your new schedule or because of COVID-19, you're not able to exercise to get in your workouts. So the first thing I would ask myself, if I were you, is, have I set my sights too high? Right. So I'd go through a little bit of sort of coaching, then upload it. And you can do this for free with a whole bunch of sites. I mean, you could use YouTube, but there's things you can get on your computer like Loom or Cloud App, which I think costs a little bit of money, but I think Loom is still free, and send a link. And then you have a piece of content. And if you're coaching a whole bunch of people via text and via email, and you have this content library of you being you in an articulate, caring, helpful way, you can then go grab your video anytime and keep repurposing it. Because, the people who work at texting support centers, I think they just have like keystrokes for everything. They rarely just, are typing a new thing, like typing the same thing, thank you for your business. I'm sure there's /B,
Thank you button. Yeah.
the thank you button, the, you know, here's the number of our lawyers when you want to sue us button.
Yeah, you know that, and that's something that it's kind of funny because I love that you do that, and that I know that was something that was happening a lot with WellStart, with what we do when you are handling the text coaching. It's something that I've done on occasion, but probably not as much as what I would like to, because I do think it's valuable. But, you know, for myself, I tend to, and, you know, part of it is the way my life is set up right now. I tend to not be in a situation where I have a calm, quiet environment and there's a 1-year-old running around
Right.
behind me or whatever. But what I end up doing is still kind of like the Kevin text version of that. I've actually got a document that I maintain that is, I just call it my FAQ responses.
Hmm.
And so I can go over there and I can copy and paste.
What's an example of one?
Oh, Lord. So I use those. Well, it's really funny, actually. The one that comes top of mind is probably the top of document one as well, is when people want to change so the system that we use for text messaging includes also notifications for other purposes coming through the same way. And when they want to change that, I've got a response for it. So it's kind of like your, you know, don't sue us or thank you or whatever kind of example with a call center. But
Right.
there's just, you know, there are just certain things that get asked often. The exercise example that I keep using is one that comes up a lot. And so there's certain things that if I can just go over there and just copy and paste, like, hey, I always recommend, you know, doing 3 breaks a day or a break every hour and do a couple of push-ups or whatever, and just copy and paste that, it makes things a lot faster.
Right.
And I don't think that it takes value either, because I'm literally going to copy it, or, you know, I'm going to type the same thing out.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
if you've ever gotten those messages from me, trust me, I'm
Yeah.
genuinely mean what I say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, so here's a little like software tip. If you know, I'm on Mac and I have a program called Text Expander, which allows me, excuse me, to create any piece of text and then a shortcut. So, for example, I turn my mailing address into I use the letter X and then a short either word or acronym. So XADD is my address, XCell is my cell phone number.
Nice.
I do like, you know, X tip jar. And tip jar is like 4 lines of text that go at the end of every blog post. Say, you know, you want to sign up for coaching. Do you want to learn how to become a coach? Do you want to contribute to the tip jar? So I don't have to keep typing it. So if you have, you know, your, you know, X exercise, X notifications, and I'm sure there's something for Windows. I think there was something when I was on Windows like 12 years ago. It's called like action keys or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great tip that we want to make sure everybody listens to. I love that, because like I said, I'm going and I've got to keep track of a document somewhere, whether it's on Google Docs, which is where this one is, and go over, and you've got to highlight the whole thing and copy it and paste it. And, you know, sure, that's easier than typing, you know, an entire message out. But, you know, some of those things that are messages that I say over and over again are not necessarily even in a document. They're in a certain place where I can remember that I emailed it to so-and-so on April 3rd, and I go over there and find it and click a bunch of links and get to there.
Right. So anything you want
So,
to template. And I'll give you another software tip if you're on Mac. There's a program called Copy Paste Pro, which, you know, if you copy something and then you paste it and then you copy something else, you lose the last thing. You have one thing.
right.
So this Copy Paste Pro lives in your menu bar at the top, and it keeps the last 50 things that you copied. And so
Wow.
you just click on it and you just go down and see. So I'm looking here. I said my last podcast, a YouTube, the title of the podcast so that I can post it in social media, a couple of Amazon book links, a photograph, the beginning of a couple of quotes. So this, you know, this goes back, as I'm looking at the last one I can see was to last Friday. So it's, you know, basically 5 days worth of things I've copied.
Yeah. I say I'm making myself a note for that. Sorry, YouTube
Yeah.
people. um, because that is, even for me, I'm like, man, that's huge. A lot of what I do, I end up copying and pasting a lot of things. So
Yeah, just as sources of information, we're only as smart as what we can lay our hands on.
yeah,
So if we're using technology to communicate with people, we might as well make ourselves as efficient. Because
efficient.
if I have a good answer and I'm like, I'm a little tired, I'm not going to give it. Whereas if it's at my
Right.
fingertips, I will.
Well, and so, you talk about being only as smart as what we can lay our hands on, the information that we can get and access. This is one of the things that for myself that I love about doing the text or discussion board type coaching is you, Howard. I've watched you coach. I have no idea how many times, and you can lay your hands on information so quickly and so easily. And this is one of the ways that I explain you to people, in this sense, is like if you ask Howard a question about just about any topic, he can go, "Oh yes, I read this book. Let me look over here." And you can turn to your bookshelf and go, "Let's see, it was a yellow book," and you
Yeah,
find the book,
yeah.
and you can
I have a
remember.
good card catalog.
You really do,
That's how my mind
and
works.
and access to it well. So I have a card
Mm.
catalog, but I don't know where any of the cards are, and they're probably on a pile somewhere in my mind.
Uh, and all the books are
So
on the floor.
yes,
Right.
I've got to have a filing system for mine. So I love the ability, though, to take a step back, take a beat, and sit there and go, okay, let's look through the card catalog and find, this thing. Okay, I remember reading something about this, but let me do a quick search on this
Mm-hmm.
to refresh my mind. Because otherwise, I'm giving very vague information and not specific quotes from a book and who wrote the
Right.
book and all these things that are.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a little bit of the secret of how I do that is I read books twice, I take
Mm.
notes, and I make mind maps. So it's not
Oh
like
yeah,
I have a different kind of brain. Like I put a lot, like reading a book for me is a waste of time if I'm not going to recall it. So I'll start reading the
yeah.
book just for fun. And as soon as I go, oh my God, this is incredible. So I'm in the middle of one right now that is
Mm.
changing the way I think about a lot of things. It's called The Wedge by Scott Carney, who wrote, the What Doesn't Kill Us.
Right.
And I'm getting all this really interesting information about depression and inflammation and how heat manipulation, saunas and cold
Mm-hmm.
can affect it. And I'm like, oh man, this could be really interesting. And
Yeah.
as soon as the book like grabs me by the balls and says, pay attention, I'm like, okay, we're gonna start, I'm going to dance with this book because
Yeah. We're reading this one twice.
I'm going to read it twice and I'm going to make a mind map and I'm gonna commit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not, it's not like I mean, there's maybe 100 books here that I'm looking at that I can reference, but maybe half of them I have like a long-term relationship with.
Yeah.
So it's not,
No, it's interesting.
it's effort.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you mentioned that as sort of, kind of the effort that you put in with that. I do a lot of audible reading of
Mm-hmm.
books, and I just let the author read to me.
Yeah.
And what I'll do though is when a book grabs me by the balls, as like how you mentioned it, and I go, holy cow, like I really want to apply some of this, then I buy the physical copy of the book.
Yeah.
And because I like to be able to, if I really want to retain something or utilize portions of a book, I want to highlight it or put a sticky note in a page or, I want a physical do something to remember that.
Yes. And there's books that I've bought hard copy that I then went and got the Audible because I wanted to listen. I wanted to like, if I go for a run and listen to it, like I'll remember when I run past that tree, what was being said in the book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting because now we're sort of going off on this other topic about learning things and applying things to your coaching knowledge. But I can remember years ago studying for a certification for strength coaching. And it's one of the, top, like really hard to pass tests. And that's exactly what I did. I just put all of the content, all of these lectures on my phone, and I just went for a bunch of runs. And I put it on shuffle even.
Uh-huh.
I didn't care what order I was listening to the information in and just let it play. And, there's something about being able to have a couple of different types of input. If you read it physically, personally, I like to read it physically and sit down in order and at a set pace where I can make notes or whatever that is if I'm doing the physical part. And then audio, just let it play.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
I may listen to the same thing 5 times, but that's okay because that's helping it to just sink in.
Yeah. I don't
So
put it on shuffle because I wear my shoes out too fast. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to say about text-based coaching?
I believe that was the main stuff. Let me just make sure I did have a little notes here. And now I'm sidetracked with the shuffle joke. I loved it. Um, oh, one thing that I was thinking about is that it's kind of at times I like that it's a way that you can sort of step back and allow them to do things for themselves rather than doing things for them. So even though I mentioned that I will identify some of the options for them a little quicker, it's also a time where I'm not right there live to answer the question as quickly. So if I leave, some of those thoughtful questions that we mentioned out there, then they may be more likely to come up with the answers on their own and then tell me what they decided.
Right. Nice. And so, I'm working on a book with Peter Bregman about applying coaching principles to sort of everyday life. And what we've come up with is the goal of this is not to help people change, although that's often a side effect. But the real goal that we're going for is helping ignite or develop their independent capability. And so if we think about it that way, that's a filter on a lot of the things that we could be. So like whatever we do, we want to make sure that they're the ones doing the push-ups, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing it for them, even in helping them make these decisions. Because we want them to own their protocols, and it's not Kevin's protocol that I'm doing as long as I'm texting with Kevin.
Right. Yeah. No. And this is a sort of terminology that we've used is the muscle of whatever it is that they're developing. The idea that a lot of the work that they're going to do while working with us is going to be mental. It's like, going to the gym with your mind and developing those skills. So,
Cool. Hey, we're almost at 40 minutes. These podcast episodes are just ballooning. So
I guess so. Sorry if you guys wanted a quick one.
Yeah. So are we done for today?
Well, yeah, no, I think that's great. I think we covered some really good stuff, and hopefully everybody else out there enjoyed some of what we had to say as well.
Okay.
So if you're watching us on YouTube and have been listening to some of this as we go, hi everyone. We've recorded these things sort of in bulk to get several of them ready in order to launch on the podcast platforms. And we're kind of now at that point where we're ready to do that. So any day now, you should be seeing us in that format. And if you're listening to us in that format, I'm sorry for saying that.
Hey, but it would help us a lot if you download a whole bunch of episodes.
Yes, download those, any reviews that are positive, especially. If you want to rate us, review us, download us, subscribe, all those things are really helpful. And right now what we're trying to do is kind of get this going as the actual podcast format. So that's a great way to help.
Yeah. I mean, negative reviews are fine, but I do want to say if you are going to take the time to listen to a bunch of episodes and write a negative review, I would like to coach you on time management because there's so many better things you could be doing.
All the hours you'd have to do to get to this conversation now.
You ever see people respond to questions on Amazon and they like someone says, will this fit a 5/8 coupling? And then someone writes back, I don't know. I don't own it.
Yeah.
It's like, I wish I had that much
why
time.
Why are you answering?
Want to talk about the Facebook group?
Yes. So that's it. So then we have the Facebook group, which is the Health Coaches Podcast. And so we've set it up as a group in order to be able to promote it as like a community for discussion. So we want you to be able to come in there to discuss with us. If you have questions you want to ask, it's a great place to suggest any topics that you've got that you'd like us to talk about on here. and just a great place to have advice from other coaches. We've got a couple dozen coaches in there. I think is about where we're at right now, as we've just launched it. So should be a good place to have some resources from some great other coaches. The other thing, if you want to email us, you can just email healthcoachespodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send us any questions or concerns, or tell us how beautiful Howard's goatee is looking this week, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, I definitely want that kind of feedback. Because I'm not getting enough kisses at home. TMI, but it may come off unless I hear a huge hue and cry from the internet.
So if you know any good beard softening creams, send them Howard's way.
Right on.
So on that note, thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it, guys, and we will talk to you again in a few days.
All right, see y'all.
Bye.